frantic emergency exodus took place overnight.
Jasper, Alberta, a beautiful town situated in Jasper National Park, one of the jewels of Canada's national park system. In July of 2024, the town was devastated by a wildfire.
There is a wildfire burning south of town right now. 4,700 people in the town of Jasper, and anyone within Jasper National Park have been told to get out.
Which destroyed a third of the town and cost nearly $1 billion in damages. This Liberal government immediately went into damage control. They blamed it all on climate change and neglected to acknowledge the fact that poor forest stewardship and management could have prevented the fire.
I've been looking at the Jasper wildfires, and one issue that has emerged is that we are experiencing winds, unpredictable winds like never before because of climate change.
Collaboratively to making sure that they have all the resources necessary to fight the wildfires that are being devastated by climate change.
This is a result of climate change, Mr. Speaker, climate change.
Almost everything this Liberal government has told you about the reasons why the Jasper fire destroyed the town of Jasper has been a lie. We have a government that puts optics over action.
It's just so big to understand.
Knowing the situation, not doing anything about it, is that a criminal act?
This is a story of political neglect, where flawed environmental ideology and complacency put public safety at risk. This is the story of how Jasper was burned by politics. Ken Hodges, a retired forester with over 35 years' experience in the forestry industry. Ken knows the mountain pine beetle, and he warned this federal government back in 2017 that Jasper was a tinderbox that was ready to blow.
Pine beetle is a little insect. It's about the size of a grain of rice. What it does is it goes after any normally mature pine trees. The female beetle will burrow into the pine tree to the cambium layer where the xylem and phloem are. Within the mandibles of the mountain pine beetle, there is a fungi. And it's the fungi that blocks the xylem and phloem. The xylem and phloem brings the water and nutrients to the tree. The main effect is it kills the tree. It's a bunch of standing dead trees. There's about 80 to 100% of the pine that are affected within the landscape. And you've got a C, 100% kill across the landscape. That if they are ignited under the right conditions, they will be carried and create a massive fire like they did in Jasper.
The mountain pine beetle migrated from the forests of British Columbia into Jasper National Park around 2014. Starting at 6,000 hectares, this pine beetle kill region spread to over 220,000 hectares by 2022. The pine beetle kills the pine tree, and it becomes fuel for a devastating forest fire.
In 2017, we actually wrote two letters to the minister at that time, Minister McKenna, and she finally responded to us, and it clearly demonstrated their lack of understanding around what situation they had around the mountain pine beetle, and they did not really have an understanding of the potential for a mega fire.
I want to give you some context on just how bad this problem is. Back in 2014, roughly 6,000 hectares of Jasper National Park was impacted by the mountain pine beetle. By 2018, it was nearly 164,000 hectares. And by 2022, it was 222,000 hectares. These are Parks Canada's own numbers. This was exponential growth in mountain pine beetle infestation, and Parks Canada did nothing about it.
How widespread is it in Jasper? Quite a bit. Were they aware of it? Yes.
The Liberals were warned. There's no excuse. Back in 2017, the Alberta Forest Products Association, Ken Hodges, and numerous others warned this government that Jasper had become a tinderbox thanks to the fuel load created by the exponential rise of the mountain pine beetle. This government had options years before the Jasper wildfire occurred. One, they could have initiated mechanical removal. At committee, they ridiculously claimed that over the past 10 years, they removed 1,700 hectares. We just previously said that nearly 230,000 hectares of forest was impacted by the mountain pine beetle, and Parks Canada is out there bragging that they removed 1,700 hectares of infested fuel load. It's a drop in the bucket. Secondly, they could have initiated more prescribed burns, but we saw for years that Parks Canada was hesitant to carry out these prescribed burns. And in one case, in an email that was exposed, it showed that they were concerned about the political perception of using prescribed burns to limit the growth of the pine beetle in the forest. Thirdly, they could have brought in logging companies to clear out the infested pine beetle wood. This is something that Parks Canada has done in the past. They have invited private logging companies to log forest in our national parks, and they've even been paid for it by these companies. So Parks Canada could have brought in private contractors to clear the deadwood out of the forests, and it wouldn't have cost taxpayers a cent. Now, there was a fourth option, and that's a forest fire. And that's exactly what happened in Jasper this past summer. When we began our investigation at the Environment Committee, we invited Liberal Minister of the Environment, Stephen Guilbeault, and Liberal Minister for Emergency Preparedness, Harjit Sajjan, to testify on how this fire was allowed to happen. And you know what they claimed at committee? They said everything that could have been done had been done, and that no stone had been left unturned in the defense of the town of Jasper.
And what we were briefed on the ground with all the Alberta, from the Premier and other ministers, that everything that could have been done was done. In fact, if the preparation hadn't taken place, that the whole town could have been lost.
This was a lie.
I don't think they understood what they had in front of them. They had such huge stand of dead mountain pine beetle, and all of a sudden they've got 30-degree weather, humidity is at 12%, you got winds gusting up to 40 or 50 kilometers an hour. There's your 30, 30, 30. The indices, fire indices have gone through the roof. Now you've got this massive thing. They weren't prepared.
We have a government that puts optics over action. Case in point, in 2019, when Parks Canada welcomed global elite Greta Thunberg to Jasper National Park to talk about the mountain pine beetle, climate change, and fire suppression.
What kind of different animals are there here usually?
When I walked down here on Friday, I saw a female grizzly bear with her 3 cubs on this trail.
And what is this coloring on the side?
So this tree is all red and dead, and it was infested by mountain pine beetle.
When we say that Jasper has been burned by politics, this is what we're talking about. If they had just put a fraction of the effort that they took to welcome this global elite to Jasper National Park, maybe they would have done something about forest management, stewardship, and the mountain pine beetle. They could have been listening to Indigenous knowledge keepers. They could have been listening to residents of the town of Jasper who actually protested back in 2018 over Parks Canada's inaction. They could have listened to forestry experts like Ken Hodges, who warned this government in 2017. They could have listened to the Alberta Forest Products Association. They didn't listen to them. They would rather listen to global elites. They would rather listen to their complacent bureaucrats who were the ones who prevented the action needing to be taken to protect the town of Jasper.
Okay, just match up with the cat. We may need 1 or 2, so I'm stepping away from the radio for about 5 minutes.
This mega fire that occurred in July of this year could have been prevented. So my question would be, who's accountable? So the way I look at it, it's a national park, that's federal government. Who's responsible for managing it? Parks Canada. Who's ultimately responsible for this goes up to the minister. He's the one directing things. In my books, the minister is at the top of the food chain. He has to take responsibility for all of that. And he blames other parties for it. They've been in power for almost 9 years. Why haven't they done anything before this? They were in power when we set things out and had them become aware of the situation, but yet nothing was done. Once a fire gets rolling, such as the one in Jasper, it doesn't care what political party you're at. It doesn't care what your bent in religion or bent in society is. It's going to burn. Knowing the situation, not doing anything about it, creating a catastrophic event such as the burning of a community and potentially destroying the ecosystem, is that a criminal act? It drives me insane to hear people playing politics in situations that can become catastrophic, which this one did.
Accountability is about finding out what went wrong and who's responsible for not taking action to prevent this devastating fire that destroyed the town of Jasper this past summer. There are other communities at risk. Banff, Canmore, Lake Louise, just to name a few.
I'm Carly Robinson in Edmonton, and now some are warning about the next potential mega fire in the tourist hotspot of Jasper.
We can't afford to sit back and let the government get away with this. With all of the expert witness testimony that we've seen, with all the evidence that we produced, if it is true that more could have been done, then it is incumbent on us to make that case so that Parks Canada and our federal governments take the urgent action that's needed to protect those towns that are at risk.
Compare the forest around Jasper to the green, healthy one that burnt 2 years ago in Fort McMurray or last year in Waterton, it doesn't look good.